Hello Nation, and welcome back to the homestead. And today we are going to be showing you how to measure your goat's heart girth and show you how to trim their hoofs. A bit of a medi-pedi, if you will. So before we actually take the measurement of her heart girth, we are going to talk about why we believe that this is important to measure. Weight loss is your number one reason to look for sickness in a goat. So it's always very helpful to go back and look at the last time that you weighed them to be able to figure out what's going on with your goat. Now I will say a little bit of a disclaimer. We do not have a weight scale here on our homestead, so we find this method the best way to be able to tell around ballpark of how much our goats weigh. Now I will say that this method is not 100% accurate, but it gives you about a range of how much your goat weighs. So how you're supposed to measure your goat's heart girth is to get some fabric tape and go about behind her front legs and measure. We don't have fabric tape, so we're gonna take a piece of black string and take it behind her front legs and measure. So we measured our string and we got about 26 inches. Now I have a little chart right here for, it's a cheat chart. That's what I'm gonna call it. So right here at 26, it says about 63 pounds. Now for a Nigerian dwarf goat, that's about average. So we know that she's good and she's nice and healthy. Now, since I have her here, might as well go ahead and trim her hooves. Now, your number one reason to want to trim your goat's hooves is it's essentially like a overgrown fingernail. It'll really start to bother them. Sometimes it can get infected. We haven't had that happen here, but it can get infected, and that's not good. But I will say, with our gravel driveway and the amount of gravel that we have on our property, if you're like us and you have gravel, you won't have to trim your goats as often as usual. Now, if you were to show them, you will need to file the bottom of the hoof, but since we're not showing them, we don't file them. So what you're going to want to do to trim your goat's hooves is you kind of want to pay attention to where you're cutting. So one, you don't cut them, because if you do cut their pads of their foot, it's very easy for them to get dirt in there, and then that's just a whole mess of infection. So you really don't want that. So how I do it is I will take my cutters and I will try to pick out some of the dirt first before I go through it, so I'm not doling my blade. So I take it, you're fine. You always want to pay attention to what your goat is doing, so that way you know if you're going too low. It's essentially like you're cutting fingernails. You always want to make sure they're level with the pad of their foot too. Like I said, if we were showing, we would take a file And we would file this down right here, but they're farm goats, so we don't really need to do that. This one's a little bit worse than the other one, but we'll get through it. You're fine. Okay. So now the front ones are going to be a little bit more difficult because it's in the front. You gotta make her a little uncomfortable. So I'm using a pair of pruners that we normally use to do our muscadine vines, but you can use, I've seen people use like wire snips and scissors. He's being a supportive husband. So that's it. That's what we do in our routine hoof trimming and checking their weight. So if you liked this video, check this one out of how Betty doubled our herd in a night. Thanks for stopping by the Big Bear Homestead. God bless and have a nice day.